A warm welcome to those attending and to our viewers watching live on the Council website, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Henry Higgins and I am the Chairman of this meeting. Details of business to be considered are today shown on the agenda, and copies of which are accessible in the room and online under the live broadcast. For those present in the room and attending to speak, please note that they will be filmed and any statement you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to anyone who's speaking today that your voice will only be heard and audible when you press the red button and it's switched on. We're not expecting any fire alarms, so if the drills. So if the fire alarm goes off, please just follow officers out of the building. For those who have mobile or tablet devices in the room, can you please make sure they're switched off or on silent? The councillors can use electronics in front of them to assist them with the agenda, because some of the agenda is on digital. So let's do the attendees before we move to the agenda. I would like to introduce our councillors. Councillor Steve Tuckwell, my Vice Chairman. Councillor Fahid Chubadar. Councillor Ekta Gohill. Councillor Gurishran Mand. Councillor Raj Sampuri. And Councillor Jadit Singh. Welcome. Officers, we have the Director of Planning and Regeneration, Planning, Environment, Education, Community Services. What a mouthful that is. James Rogers, standing to my right. A Plan Team Leader, Fiona Ray. Also, a Planning Team Leader, Kate Crosby. And a Principal Planning Officer, Nisha Burnham. Welcome. Also, Alan Tilley, our Transport Officer, our Legal Advisor, and the Borough Solicitor. Welcome. But make sure we say that. Glenn Egan, and Democratic Service Officer, Anissa Teji, who makes sure that I do everything that I'm supposed to do and do it in the correct order. We're going to the agenda to start off with. Apologies for absence, Anisha.
No apologies, Chairman. Okay,
any declarations of interest in the matters before this meeting? No? Okay, brilliant. To receive and agree the minutes of the last meeting? That agreed? Thank you very much. Matters notified in advance or urgent, we have none. And to confirm public and private reports, everything's in public. I'm going to move on to the agenda, but before I do that, I have an announcement. James Rogers with that long title. I'm not going to read it again. I'll save you that. Will be leaving us, and I just want to say on record that I want to thank him. I've known him since 2006 and worked with him for many years, and has been a great asset to this borough. And I would like to wish him well in the future, and I'm sure the rest of the committee would like to do the same. So all the best, James, and I hope everything is less stressful. No late nights anymore. You'll be lucky for that. Just leave it to us. You can always watch us on YouTube if you forget everything that we'd forgotten about you. Anyway, that's enough said. I will get on now to the main report. Item 6, 102 Weymouth Road, Charville.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
So just introducing the report for 102 Weymouth Road. Planning permission is sought for a change of use to a specialist care home that would be in use class C2 instead of the existing residential C3 use. There's no external changes to propose to facilitate the change of use, apart from there would be some cycle storage to the front and refuse storage. And the use would be for young people aged between 11 and 17. So the property you can see on the site plan is on the southeast side of Weymouth Road. It's a semi-detached property with quite a small rear garden because part of it's been built upon. And just next door is Hayes Park, which you'll see on the constraints plan next. There's a low PTAL rating as well of 1B. So there's the constraints plan that just shows you that area of greenbelt to the side, Hayes Park. Turning to the plans, you can see in the front garden there would be one cycle store proposed and some refuse storage as well. There's some minor changes to the visibility sprays to just improve, as people come in and out of the driveway. But on floor plan, there are no changes proposed at all. It's the use that will change. So if you compare the two, they are identical. This is just the siting in context, showing you its position at the end of that cul-de-sac. and here is a street view image of the property. It's the semi on the left-hand side. The care home, as I said, was for children that are 11 to 17 years old. There will be a team or a staff member on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so there will be someone there all the time. One of the issues to note is that transport is a key issue. We have come to an on-balance decision with our colleagues in highways, and we're satisfied that there would be no discernible stress as a result of the use, taking into account the number of staff and everything else as discussed in the report. So that concludes my presentation, Chairman. I just want to quickly turn to the petitioner's photos that were included, which we may refer back to. So this is one of the rear garden. This is the side access. You would have seen from our summary there's references to the existing bars on the windows next to the park. That's another view down onto the rear garden and a view of the property at the end of the street. So I'll just keep them for reference, but thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Fiona. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is a petition item. Mary Early, would you like to come take a seat? May I tell you, what you have is you have 5 minutes. We have a traffic light system here. So you have, yes you will do. No, just press it and you come on. You'll see that you have a green light. When it gets to amber, it means you've got a minute. And when it gets to red, I will stop you. That's not because I'm being rude, but that's what the committee allows me to do. So I'll let you get on with that. Okay, whenever you press the button, we'll start.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this evening. I have made a few notes, in case I forget what I'm going to say, listing the reasons why the local residents are strongly objecting to 102 Weymouth Road being turned into a children's home. Lack of transparency on the planning application as to the nature of the intended business, and the mention of a therapeutic home with only 2 staff on duty at any one time leads us to believe this will be a home for older children with behavioural problems. At the time, we weren't aware that it was 11 to 17-year-olds. Merely a children's home was all the info we had. It appears that Mrs. DeHooth, the applicant, according to Companies House website, is General Manager for One Stop Care Services, a company providing care for those with learning difficulties, mental health issues, substance abuse and behavioural problems. The houses in this cul-de-sac were originally built as small 2-bedroom houses for families with small back gardens. Number 102 has been extensively extended into the back garden and to the side, with extension upon extension at the back, which only leaves about 4.5 metres by 5 metres as the actual back garden, a very small space for a children's recreation area. The planning application describes it as a landscape garden, which I feel is very misleading. I have provided photographs to substantiate this. In view of the foregoing, I would like to point out that the area around the entrance to the park, which is right next to 102 Weymouth Road, has a long history of antisocial behaviour problems, gangs of youths hanging around, drug dealing and substance abuse, which has been witnessed by neighbours on many occasions and reported to the police. In fact, there was an incident last week on July the 6th when 3 cars were parked by the gates at about 7 p.m. The occupants got out and were hanging around smoking and openly dealing in drugs. This was reported to the police. This sort of thing is a regular occurrence. Charville Ward Panel and the police have now made this an area of priority. I'm reliably informed. A few years ago, we had to get a dispersal order in place for the area. Is this a suitable environment for vulnerable young people to be housed? The previous owner of this property felt the need to install bars with barbed wire over the side windows that overlook the park for their own safety. You had seen the photo of that. Traffic safety, parking and noise. The 8 houses in the cul-de-sac are in very close proximity to each other, and the road is actually very narrow, leaving only 4 available parking spaces on the road, because you cannot park each side of the road or you'll block it off. There are only 2 parking spaces in the forecourt of number 102. I believe that for this development, this doesn't meet the council's parking policy. Any additional traffic or parking would be disruptive and disproportionate to the area. Also, please note this is the entrance to the allotments, with cars constantly needing access through the gates. We already have a parking problem here, with drivers using the park. My own garden wall has been damaged on 2 separate occasions in the last 18 months, with cars and vans trying to turn around. A children's home will inevitably generate more traffic and problems as well as noise. Hedgewood School, which is a special needs school, is nearby and generates extra traffic already. Some of these children walk to the school, passing close by to number 102, so any more traffic could mean more danger to those children. This cul-de-sac is a family residential road in which several young children as well as senior citizens live. Their safety and welfare, as well as that of children who may end up living in number 102, also needs to be considered. There are already a number of HMOs in the Charville area, one in Goshawk Gardens and one in Lansbury Drive, both about 200 yards from the cul-de-sac, very close proximity really. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before you go, the council's allowed to ask you questions. I hope you don't mind.
Okay.
If they want to, I don't know whether they have any questions, but does anybody have any questions for the petitioner? No? You may go. Thank you very much. Can you turn the light off?
I press that?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, now the applicant, Mr. Jim... Harry, oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. Harry Johnson. Sorry, Harry, can you... Okay, fine. Okay, if you, as you know, 5 minutes, press the button, off we go. See, I should put my glass on you. Tell me to put my glasses on you. That's all right, take your time.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. My name is Harry Johnson and I am the agent for this application. The development proposal is for the change of use of an existing semi-detached residential dwelling to a use class C2 children's home with amenity space and parking provision. Given the location of the site within an established residential area, the applicant has sought to work closely with the council to ensure that a high quality development is achieved. Since the submission of this application in late August 2021, we worked hard to address the comments of local residents and consultees at every stage. Accordingly, the proposed development is considered acceptable for the following reasons. Firstly, the creation of a new small residential care facility will meet an established need within the borough, as identified by Mr. Michael Jones within the Social Care Department of the Council. As such, the principle of the development is considered acceptable. The 4 residents of the new facility will benefit from being raised in a caring atmosphere that mirrors as far as practicable a traditional residential living environment. As such, occupiers will have access to private rear amenity space as well as communal amenity space in the adjoining park. As the property will retain a use for 4 occupants, there will be no fundamentally different comings and goings that would result in adverse noise impacts. And for clarity, 2 members of staff will remain on site 24 hours a day, with the manager also on site between the hours of 9 till 5. 2 car parking spaces have been accommodated on site, which is considered sufficient to serve the development. Nevertheless, in line with policy DMT6, an additional car parking space has been demonstrated to be easily accommodated within the 200 metres surrounding the site by parking survey, should it be necessary. It is also noted that 3 cycle parking spaces are proposed to serve the development, This is in excess of the one space required by Local Plan Policy DMT5, and again speaks to the efforts we have made throughout this application to create a high-quality, sustainable living environment for residents and staff. I would like to reassure members at this point that the proposed care home will provide long-term residential care to those who need it most, children who are vulnerable and disadvantaged. In doing so, it will perform an important and positive role for the local community, which I'm sure you will share my view is very valuable. The application is supported by specialist reports, including a planning statement, transport note and parking survey. These submissions have all been subject to detailed review by the Council and their relevant consultees, who agree that the proposed scheme should be supported. Therefore, in line with your officer's recommendation, I respectfully urge members to grant permission for the application. Thank you for listening. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Harry. You've in time and everything. Is there any questions? Yes, Councillor Tuckwell.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for taking us through your points this evening. A couple of questions from me. We've heard from the petitioners about the fear of noise and antisocial behaviour as a result of the care facility or the change of use. The report goes a couple of times. It mentions that, and it's great to see that there's staff on site. Trained staff will be there. But the report goes on to talk about we've managed by staff who will assist in minimising the potential for adverse impacts on the amenity of occupiers, specifically dealing with noise and antisocial behaviour. I'd just like to know what kind of measures you'd have in place to ensure that, if this was to go ahead, that there would not be any impact on the neighbouring residents in this cul-de-sac.
Yeah, so obviously by the very presence of having a team on site 24 hours a day, and obviously an additional manager on site 9 till 5, you are naturally going to have little impact for occupants of this facility to be committing antisocial behaviour, because they're going to be managed consistently for 24 hours. In terms of, so your question is just referring to the impact of antisocial behaviour from occupants on the neighbouring properties, is that right?
If I can come for you, Chairman. It's really about what you've got trained staff there. What measures would they have in place to prevent the risk of antisocial behaviour spilling into the neighbouring community?
So these are all trained social care staff. So they're trained in measures of de-escalation. They're trained in sort of behavioural techniques to look after these children and make sure they're managed and they don't commit acts of antisocial behaviour in the first place. I think, like I just said, the presence of them being on site 24 hours a day will further minimise that. You've got, a 2-to-1 ratio there with 2 members of staff and 4 occupants, which means that you've always got somebody who will have time and be able to control and manage occupants. I also don't think it's fair to just sort of presume that there will be sort of any antisocial behaviour issues here. These are children that are vulnerable and disadvantaged, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's bound to be an issue here. As you'll appreciate, they need support, and that is why there's a dedicated team of 3 staff members which will be in place to manage them throughout their whole time at the home.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. If you turn the microphone off for me, that'd be great. Now I call the councillor. Councillor Davis, would you like to come to the table? As because you're a councillor, you don't get 5 minutes, you only get 3. That's because apparently you talk too much. So we'll. So when you press the red button, it will go on.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm here today as a Conservative councillor for the Charville ward in support of the residents' petition against the change of use of 102 Weymouth Road. Over the past few months, I've had a number of residents make contact with myself over this matter, and I have to agree with them. Currently in Charville, we have 10 special provision properties. 4 of these are less than half a mile of Weymouth Road. Since these properties have been in use, there has been a vast increase in antisocial behaviour, which I believe could be slightly possible if this development was to be approved, or change of use, I should say. This site will be situated on an already oversubscribed road with a number of parking issues and traffic problems, mostly caused by the local school. The planning and design statement states that we will be parking 2 vehicles. I believe this is inadequate and unrealistic with the setting. A child with special requirements will have a lot more additional support from social worker teams to healthcare workers and possibly community transport. Is this all going to fit in 2 parking spaces? I think not. The council standard would require 3 parking spaces, therefore this does not meet the parking commitments required. I would also raise that some concerns over the traffic survey, as there is no mention of the other special needs school and the number of vehicles that pass that way through Weymouth Road and Grosvenor Avenue. To say that there is 30% unused parking spaces on Weymouth Road is massively inaccurate. I might also add that there is a shortage of 4-bedroom houses within Hillingdon, especially within the Hayes area. Why are we allowing another family dwelling to be removed? I ask this committee to consider our residents today and to continue to put them first by making their decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Well spoken. Anybody got any questions? No? You may go and sit down. Thank you very much. Okay, you don't want to say anything, do you? No. Thank you very much for all of that. Okay. I just want to, before we get underway, I'm just going to ask Glenn to come in here, because...
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's just in relation to the suggestion made that having children on site may automatically or give rise to a greater risk of antisocial behaviour. I think committee needs to be very careful about making that assumption. There's no objection, for example, from the police here or from any other council departments that might give rise to there might be that risk of behaviour there. I think what the report says is there is a needed facility here. If committee is concerned about the possibility of antisocial behaviour, I'd say you need to have clear evidence of that. If you're looking to impose a condition relating to antisocial behaviour, or to refuse on that basis. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Okay, so open to the floor. Councillor Troubadour, you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have listened to the petitioner and the ward councillor, and I see their point with regard to car parking. Therefore, I would like the officers to basically reiterate whether 2 car parking spaces would be sufficient for this dwelling. The second point which I'm making, which is again coming from the ward councillor, is the removal of a 4-bedroom property, because in Hillingdon there's a huge shortage of 4-bedroom properties, and we are changing a family dwelling into, we are losing another family dwelling of 4 properties. And then lastly, the petitioner also mentioned the small garden and the amenity space which is available to the residents. You have to realize this is not only for children, you've got the staff, social workers, etc., etc. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Officers, answer some of those questions.
Yes, happily, Chairman. With regard to the parking issue, we've done quite a lot of work around that, because when you look at the London plan standard is lower, but taking on our local plan standard, we've said that there's 3 spaces needed for this type of use. However, when you look at the wider impact and look at that carefully, which we've made them do by doing a transport assessment, we believe that in this particular location, if there is a 3rd car at any one point, it can be taken in on street and wouldn't be harmful, not so harmful as to warrant a refusal, because the test for a refusal on highways grounds is quite high. So those surveys were undertaken at night time, so when the demand is greatest in that local area. They haven't specifically referenced the school in that. I think that's correct, the school nearby. But for this particular location, this particular use, we're not concerned that it doesn't contain that information, because we've been given the worst case scenario, i.e. at night. So that would be my answer to parking, but Alan may want to follow up shortly after. The removal of the 4-bedroom house, that's another point that we've considered carefully. But what we have to appreciate is that the use identified here, this children's care home, is also needed. So we've got the identified need of 4-bed and 3-bed homes, but we also need these kind of facilities for our vulnerable children in Hillingdon. So we've weighed that up, and we are happy and satisfied that, you know, the loss of that 4-bed is okay in this instance because of the benefits around the new use. And finally, with regard to the small garden, through you, Chairman, there's no identified amenity space needed for this use. So there's no policy that says you have to have X amount. So there is a space outside that they can escape to and use, but there's also got the benefit of the park next door, which is a benefit, and why this location, we believe, is acceptable as officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. That answered your question, Councillor Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, to a certain extent, but taking into account that there are about 10 special provision properties nearby, I can't see how we could justify the need to change this property into another one within that area. And there was a mention of HMOs being nearby as well, and there is a restriction in how many HMOs you could have within a certain area. Are we actually fulfilling all those requirements? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
James will answer those questions for you.
Yeah, houses in multiple occupation are where family property is subdivided for different adults to share. This is a different use. This is meeting an identified need, which is for housing vulnerable children. And I echo some comments that were made earlier, that doesn't imply there's any antisocial behaviour. There could be refugees. There's all sorts of reasons why children can be vulnerable. It shouldn't be assumed that there's anything, in effect, wrong with the children. So I think it would be wrong to be drawing in local HMOs into the equation, because they are different use from that proposed here.
Okay.
I think that's the point I wanted to make.
Should answer that. Does that answer that? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Tocqueville.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is one of those tricky ones, isn't it? Because, you know, I fully support the provision of, you know, a facility which is going to give young people some stability and a lift in, you know, from whatever they've been through in previous years. I think it's important that we have a facility that provides a nurturing environment that people can get into adult life. So I think that's absolutely vital. But I also listen to the residents and think about how do we safeguard them from, you know, we talk about antisocial behaviour, and the reason it was mentioned because it's in the report several times. I do appreciate that, you know, we shouldn't assume that that's going to be the case. What does lead me to a question, there is one coming, is around the parking, and you can see from the image there it is tight. And my question is around transport in relation to how are these youngsters going to be getting to their education facilities? You know, is it going to be community transport? Is it going to be that they're going to walk? You know, which is it? Because if we're finding ourselves in a position of having additional community transport, minibuses, into this small location, then I can see that causing a big problem, not just for the residents but also for the people in this facility. So I'd be interested to hear sort of what that looks like.
Yeah, James will come back.
I think I'd like to help committee at this point. I think one thing that's quite critical is whether we're dealing with 4 children, 6 children or 8 children. So I've been looking very carefully at condition 4, and it refers to it states basically that the property could only be used as a 4-bedroom residential care home for children. But okay, hypothetically, what happens if they put a double bed in one of the rooms? That means we've got 5 children. So what I would like to suggest to committee is you delegate to me to insert the words no more than 4 children, and perhaps you may wish to add under the age of 18, because they are both those things are within the written statement to the applicant, and I'm already feeling that committee would want this to be very strictly conditioned if you are to approve it. And so I think with both those two additions, I can't see any reason why the applicant would have any concern with them, and they would strengthen condition 4. But the key thing here is that through changes I'm proposing, I think I'd then be able to say to you, definitely it's only children, it's no more than 4, and on that basis, it's hard to envisage the level of traffic impacts that are going to cause problems on the highway network, basically.
Okay. We'll come back.
So I appreciate that's not a kind of highway engineer's response, but it's more a kind of thinking ahead. Well, in a practical sense, how would we justify refusing a children's home with just 4 children on highway grounds? And I'm struggling to think how you could do that.
Can I come back for you, Chairman? So, I get the point. I've actually got written down here we should be strengthening condition 4 to include occupancy ages, so to safeguard that. But and again, I welcome the concept of this scheme, because I think it's a valuable asset and it's going to serve young people really well going forward. There's no doubt about that. But we do have to protect the residents, and condition it as much. Also, a refusal, we could lose control of conditions. It could go to the inspector, and the inspector can dilute or delete conditions as well. So we need to, in this committee, find the best way in which we can have a provision which is great for our community and for young people, but also safeguards the interests of the neighbouring residents as well. And the number one issue is going to be parking. And it comes back to the point, are we going to be seeing minibuses visiting this site? Potentially, with transporting people to educational facilities in the borough and outside of the borough. So I don't know if that's a question for Alan or someone.
Thank you, Chairman. The development will provide 2 car parking spaces, and that is in accordance with policy, bearing in mind that the 3 car parking spaces policy would allow is a maximum standard. The traffic surveys have been undertaken, which has shown there's 35% spare capacity on the surrounding roads. As Fiona mentioned, that's during the night time. During the daytime, when local residents are away at work, you'd expect that capacity on the street to be even higher. With regards to the question of a minibus, I haven't seen anything that would suggest that the occupiers of this dwelling would need special transport. There would be 2 carers there 9 to 5, and I would see those as mums and dads, and the children head off to school by whatever arrangements as per a regular family. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Todd, would you like to come back?
I think I heard from Alan there, so I'm
You're happy? Okay, good. I just want to also note that James is going to tell you some more information. I won't take this thunder.
This isn't something you can condition, but it might provide more comfort to you as a committee. Fiona was checking for me, and the applicant has stated in their planning statement that it will be registered with Ofsted, this premises. The relevance of that is, I'm sure members have heard of Ofsted. They inspect a whole multitude of premises, from schools to different scales of care home, and it's a different consent regime. It's not something I'm afraid you can get involved with through planning conditions or anything, but the fact that that there are other organisations that will be scrutinising this premises hopefully gives both committee and residents some comfort. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Right, so Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for the officers. It's been mentioned that there is clearly a need for this type of specialist care, especially for young adults in Hillingdon. Do we have any idea for this ward in particular, for Charville, if such facilities exist currently, if any? And if they do, what's the sort of vicinity in relation to this property that we have here?
Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have that data about Charville in particular, but I know that from the planning statement, and we have no evidence to counter that there is only one other care facility within a 1 kilometre radius of this site. so there's not a proliferation of care home uses within this area. So that's the only information I can offer on that point.
Councillor Manns, okay. Right. Any other questions? No? So someone's got to do something. So
I'll lead out on that, Mr. Chairman. I think with the beefing up of condition 4 to include the occupancy, and with the points that have been raised, again I've said, I welcome this facility and I think it's vital, but I also think we just need to make sure these conditions are supporting the local community. So if we was to refuse it, it would go to the planning inspector. The likelihood is it would be allowed, and the likelihood is we might have some of our conditions diluted. So if we want to maintain control of this application and maintain control over the conditions, I'd be happy to go with officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Tony, to the top. Well, and Councillor Sapori.
Yeah. I have listened to the argument made by the resident and agent and discussion as well. I fully understand that there are some concern, but at the same time the officer gave us very detailed report, and it is clearly written that we need a children care home, and there will be no according to the officer report, there will no any adverse effect on the area. So I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sapori. Okay, so I'm proposing second. The reason what we're voting on is with the changes for James to beef up condition 4. And anything else you want to add to that, James? No, I think that's it. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour of this application? That's unanimous. Thank you. So that's been approved. Okay, thank you very much. We now go on to item 7, which is 107 Hairfield Road. I haven't got not you yet. You're too eager. You're too eager. We have to just let us we do the things. Right.
Thank you, Chairman. It relates to 170 Hairfield Road, and planning permission is sought for a new 3-bedroom bungalow to the front of that property. We've received an appeal against non-determination on this site, so what we're putting forward to you this evening is our recommendation that will form our statement of case, so us defending our recommendation to refuse planning permission. So just turning to the constraints plan to start off, you can see that it's in a parking management area, and this is the existing site plan. So you can see the property 170 and its neighbour 172, and you can see it just on the left within the context. In the supporting information with the application, we hear a lot about sort of backland development, things in that area not being sort of regular and traditional in form. There's a cluster of houses around, but this is unfortunately for us still unsuccessful in terms of its design. So there's the proposed site plan up on the screen now, and this relates to our first reason for refusal, which we're concerned about the character and appearance impact. This property will sit directly in front of number 170. It will have a very small rear garden in relation to others. It's close in proximity to the main road. As you approach it from either side around the curve of the street, it would, in our opinion, appear incongruous. And all of this contributes to a cramped and unsuccessful design. So that's the first reason for refusal we're putting to you. When you have a look at the ground and first floor plans, you can see that it has been quite carefully designed. We've got the bathrooms at first floor level to the back so that the windows could be obscure glazed, and that the main outlook at first floor level is to the street. But we still have some concerns about the relationship between this new property and number 170, which I'll show you in a slide in a moment. This is just a section showing the roof arrangement, and this is going to show you the overlooking issue, which is reason for refusal 2. Sorry, confusing things. So you can see it's in very close proximity and directly in front of 170. Now 170 is set over 2 floors, so the first floor windows are going to look down directly into that new property in their garden and in their rear ground floor windows. and a boundary treatment isn't going to stop that. So we're very concerned about that relationship and that impact. These are the proposed elevation. It's quite a simple, pleasant design. It's similar to one that was approved previously around the back of the site, which is explained in the report. So it's quite sort of inoffensive in terms of its design. It's its position and its cramped, kind of contrived design, positioning we're concerned about. This is the sort of bird's eye view that shows you the context. So now we have a new bungalow in the back of this site here, and this is the front of the site where the new property is proposed. Just some photographs for you now. So this is an image of the existing property, number 170, and its attached neighbour you can just see on to the left, and that bungalow at the back of the site. This was before, they've actually now put up a different boundary treatment, which you'll see in a minute, but this is a before photo, before anything happened to the front, and you can see that pair and that context and the kind of, you know, verdant character we've got there. And that's another photo, similarly, as previously existing. And this is an image now. So they've put up this boundary fencing, which isn't part of this application per se. It's subject to a separate enforcement investigation. But this is part of the result, so having its own curtilage and the change that has on the street scene and the character. And you can just see that bungalow to the rear. This is a view looking down, so this helps you see the level change. So this is looking down onto Hairfield Road. So to the right-hand side, you can see the back of number 170 and down to the street. So that level change is why we're so concerned about overlooking in particular between the properties. And so officers are recommending refusal for the application, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Well done, Fiona. Precise to the point. Okay, so we have Scott Warne. You may come now. As I said earlier, you have 5 minutes. When it goes to amber, it means you've got 1 minute. When it's red, I will stop you. Okay? So whenever you press the button, we'll go.
Thank you for the time. Just wanted to put the position of all the local residents. We had a petition signed of 29 local residents around this particular area, including the neighbours across the road of Hairfield Road as well. And as you say, because of the gradient, the people at 207 are really concerned because there's going to be no frosted glass opportunity at the front even, so they'll be directly looking straight into their front of their house and into their front window. Just a perspective for myself, I'm 172. So I've got some pictures here, but this is kind of the outlook, as you say, as it is currently, and that was taken in line with the centre of it. So what's not clear always is the Ordnance Survey map. The gardens are not always straight, and the lines don't always meet. So when you look at, you know, the actual proposal, you will be looking at something similar to this because of the heights, and as we said, there's a gradient, but my understanding that this property is almost the size of the house that it's actually there for. So although it's going down a couple of metres, the actual building size is significant. So it is as high as the actual houses. So if you actually levelled it off, it would be near enough as high as the full house, which they are. They're significantly higher. They've got tall ceilings and stuff. So the fact that they can do that means that the outlook from 172 even, as you showed down that driveway, I've got a similar one on the other side. Because of the angles, you actually would lose that vision down the other side. That's it. So I've got equivalent of that on the other side, which would disappear because the garden is slightly adjacent. So as that comes across, there'll be some trees that's been planned to put across as a boundary, which would then stop the light coming round in the evening, so it wouldn't go in my front room. So it'll be a severe loss of amenity and detrimental to the character in the area. So, you know, we're supporting the proposed planning, rejection, refusal, and it was just really to put some context to what's being planned. So we've got some trees that have been put in temporarily, which are 5.2 metres high, but they're only 7.5 metres away from the house. So there is going to be no light coming through, especially as the sun gets lower in the winter. Obviously this house is a big house, so it's a 4-bedroom house, equivalent of my own. So previously had a parking turnaround area, so now it has a place with 2 car parking spaces. But with the high fences for the new property, they can only reverse or blindly drive out for the road where we've got an additional property that's just been approved. So we've now got 2 houses behind it that there'll be some traffic coming through. We've had incidents where the house is up for sale now at the back, which is absolutely fine because it's been approved. But there's been people reversing down in trucks because there's no turnaround zone. So it's the unintended consequences I think the neighbours are all concerned about, you know, and we're just looking to make sure that we don't lose what we've had, and you know, for the sake of actually just putting a big concrete building in somewhere where we've got a small amount of grass left, basically. Some other things that have come up quickly before we run out of time. It shows 2 car parking spaces on there, and I know the highway agencies are happy with that. One of the questions come up was that it's mentioned there's going to be an EV parking bay. Another question would be, if it was plugged in, is someone going to get out, unplug it, move it, so the car can drive in and drive out? Because that's the proposal for the parking. There's going to be no reversing. So I would challenge the basis on that and say, look, if you've got 2 parking spaces, one behind each other, there will be reversing onto the main road at some point or across the bridleway. So that would be a big concern for us as well for safety, because there is sections of drive with certain gaps between them at the moment. Apart from that, there was one other thing in the unintended consequence. My neighbour for 170A, which was behind where the new property was, what's happened is, unintended consequence. She likes to have her privacy, and where's her chip, I think it's called. So she can't do that in the front room at the moment because there is no privacy now. So what we're trying to say is that actually sometimes it can look good on paper, but when you actually hit the plot and the way things are shaped, they don't always pan out like they would, and we don't want that to be affecting anyone intentionally. And that's not always easy to put in a report because you don't see it until after the event. I think that's about it from me. Unless I've missed anything. So, unless anyone's got any questions, I'm done.
Well done. It left. Okay, has anybody got any questions for the... No? Thank you very much. You may go back to your seat. Thank you. The applicant... Jim Beek, isn't it? It's Dutch, isn't it? There you go. I'd like to take a... Van de Beek. Oh, you're the agent. Okay, fine. Yeah. Yes, if you just nod to who's got them? You've got them?
Just double check. Are they at the back of the presentation?
I'm not sure whether they've been included in the presentation, but they were circulated to members, and I've got some handouts if you want to share them.
Yeah, no. I mean, I know that all members have had them, but
The other side.
But we have Anisha's very good. She's got it all prepared. So, does any members require this? The photographs? Have you seen them? Let me just hand them out before you start. Okay, they'll have a look while you're speaking. So.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's disappointing that the applicant's strenuous efforts to engage with the planning officer throughout the application period did not yield any dialogue. Hillingdon failed to determine this case in any reasonable time frame, given it is currently nearly 4 months overdue. It has proven necessary to appeal the application for non-determination to the planning inspectorate to reach a decision, and this alone appears to have sparked a reaction so quick that we were only given a week's notice of the committee date and provided a copy at that point of the officer's report and reasons for refusal. The first of these considers the proposal uncharacteristic and visually incongruous and out of harmony with the local character and street scene. In truth, Hairfield Road provides a rich mixture of housing types and scales which make it impossible to define a typical pattern, a principle which the council agreed with when granting the previous consent for the bungalow to the rear of the property. In fact, the 30-metre plus front setbacks of numbers 168 to 172 are themselves exceptional, making them uncharacteristic. A large garage block to the front of 168 already reinforces a very strong street wall running the length of Hairfield Road, and the narrow break in front of 170 to 172 limits the visual impact of these properties on the conventional concept of street scene, framed as it is by dense planting to adjoining properties. The frontage of number 172 is a shared driveway, making it in reality a backland property. Tall hedging in front of 168, Hairfield obscures views of both of that dwelling and its forecourt, which is largely used for car parking. The claim that the proposal would reduce openness is in effect a prescription against all development, and particularly so where the new dwelling would simply reinforce an existing street line. The council has history resisting siting of new buildings closer to Hairfield Road, such as the new flats at number 178, but in that case the planning inspectorate found that both the siting and the car parking were consistent with the local context. The tiering of multiple dwellings back from the street resulting from later developments is a general feature of the local context, including those of the adjoining plots to this proposal. The second reason for refusal claims harmful overlooking and loss of privacy between the proposed dwelling and numbers 170-172 Hairfield, primarily due to the separation distance falling below the 21-metre limit. However, there are multiple examples in the local context of similar or even closer relationships between properties which have been allowed by Hillingdon. For many of these, the distance to gardens is significantly less than that proposed here. Only oblique views would actually be possible from number 172, and these are more distant than claimed in the report. Views from ground floor openings are naturally obscured by site boundaries, while those from the first floor can easily be mitigated by fitting obscured glass and by planting a natural screen, a common feature in the context. Both these solutions were actually conditions set by planners for the recently constructed bungalow to the rear of number 170, and now in this case are being used as a reason for refusal. There's photos in the pack which show a recently planted screen, which has not taken full root and full growth at this point, but demonstrates how the overlooking views onto the site and back can be mitigated by that. The last reason for refusal given is for failure to meet standards outlined in Part M42 of the building regulations. The access officer's own assessment, included in the officer's report, was that the plans need to be amended, not that the scheme needed to be refused. And we agree that all provisions are readily achievable with minor internal variations. Contrary to this consultee advice, the planning officer offered no opportunity to address these points. The reason for refusal is also hastily and poorly drafted. There is no diagram 27 in Part M42, and even if diagram 2.7 is intended, that would be irrelevant since the scheme evidently complies with this particular requirement. In conclusion, we believe that the scheme has been recommended for refusal without thorough study of the site and full evidence provided by the applicant. Due to time constraints of this presentation, we have only addressed the 3 listed objections, but a number of statements in the officer's report are also factually incorrect. No explanation has been offered for the extreme delay to this and previous application, which has made it necessary to lodge the appeal, which in any event will make the final determination on this case.
Thank you very much. 15 seconds to go. Refreshed. Anybody got any questions for the agent? No? Thank you. You may turn the microphone off for me and return to your seat. Thank you. Do you want to pick up any of those? Yeah, sorry, I've got one. Councillor Bowles. Deja vu. Back again. When you're ready, you know that I don't have to explain to you. You've got 3 minutes to. Okay, take care.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to support the recommendation of the local support the recommendations and the local residents in refusing this application. Having visited the site, it's obvious that this would be an inappropriate development. The developer has chanced their arm by doing some work on the site, removing trees and putting a large fence around it already. And the trees they planted there are about 15 metres from number 172's front window. So there's a, there's a token amount of trees apart. You see them peeping over the fence. The whole thing is a money-grabbing scheme that won't enhance the local area, and we're seeing time and time in North Uxbridge. It was explained about the building built at the back. This property is being ripped to shreds. The development at the back was put up, and there was lots of argy-bargy over that. It's still not 100% satisfactory, to my knowledge now. And just the driving way. I was a bit disappointed the highways couldn't come up with a recommendation for refusal as well, but so be it. It would have strengthened the recommendation. I think time and time again we're seeing these land grabs in North Uxbridge, and I think we've got to stand up to these greedy developers, and the officer's report is good as far as I've read it, and I think we should fully support it 100%. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anybody have any questions? No? Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. Right, so there's quite a lot been said, so I'm going to let officers come in and verify a few bits and pieces, and then I will open it to the floor.
Yeah, I do know this part of the borough extremely well, and obviously there are a lot of properties with the letter A after the address. So, for instance, you've got 211, then 213A, then 213. But what you'll find is they're either infill plots, so in the case of 213A, you've got 211, then there was a gap, and then the house was put in between that 211 and 213A. Or in the case of another nearby property, 166A, there was a very long garden, so property was put at the back of number 166. Officers of the council did work proactively with this developer a couple of years ago, and we did allow what was then a contentious application for the for the property at the rear, which in that regard isn't unusual to this particular street scene. But what would be unusual would be were this front property to be allowed, because you've then got an arrangement where you've got it's not what I call an infill plot. It's a sort of a front garden plot. You've got the back garden plot, and then you've got the house in the middle, in effect. So, and I appreciate that's not quite how the agent described it, but that's how I would describe it. And I do think it would be incongruous. And I state that from having been out to this particular site and knowing this particular location. I do know that two members of the committee accompanied me on a site visit when we looked at the rear plot. So I'll leave it at that at the moment, but I have to, basically, I disagree with the agent's comments on character. And I'd also say, because of the non-determination appeal, that has meant we've had to produce a report, and I stand by the three refusal reasons.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, James. Right, so I'm going to open it to the floor. Who's going to take me away? Councillor Tuckwell and Councillor Singh. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I know this part of the world quite well. We've determined a number of applications along here, and it does have an unusual street scene. You can see from the image there. But I do share the sentiment that we've just heard there from Deputy Director of Planning. In relation, it's just too much in relation to what we've got here. Councillor Bell's raised an issue around transport and parking, and I'll just be interested to hear from officers. Is there merit in an additional refusal reason which would address any parking concerns?
I might be about to steal Alan's thunder here. In allowing the rear bungalow, we accepted the suitability of the access. So that would immediately, as a starting position, make it difficult to start raising issues with the same highways access in terms of the front bungalow. So that would be my initial comment, but Alan may wish to add to that.
Yeah, I just also, before you get, because I'm going to get you to answer two questions at the same time. The petitioner did mention about the AV charging point and how difficult that would be. Can you explain that one as well?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies, but it's at the same time perhaps good news. I have identified one further reason for refusal, and that would be on highway grounds. It's just been picked up by myself that the proposed driveway has both an in and out access, and that is counter to the council's guidelines. Colleagues would flatly refuse to build it because it's counter to their guidelines. And the point made by the petitioner regarding electric vehicle charging points, I can understand. Yes, I'll leave it at that. The reason for refusal on highway grounds would be it's counter to the council's vehicle crossover policy.
Well done, Alan. We'll have to see if Thank you, Chairman.
I just want
James will concur.
there may be something that's contradictory to what I just said, but what I was referring to was the left-hand access point, which is the one that the existing one. I think, Alan, what you're referring to is that to the right there's the new crossover. Yeah. So that's not what I was referring to.
So is that a reason for refusal? Yes.
If Alan thinks that the right-hand crossover is a concern, then that's something totally new.
Okay.
Totally new aspect of this application. That was nothing to do with the bungalow. What I was effectively trying to say is that we can't refuse something that we allowed through the bungalow, but Alan's referring to something totally different.
Okay, so if committee wants to do that, they might do that. Yeah, sorry. Glenn.
Chairman, thank you. Just because an appeal is pending here, I just wanted to offer some further advice. And this refusal reason 3, the premises do not provide step-free access, and it was suggested by the agent that the plans could have been amended. They should have been told that, and the approval could then be considered. Obviously, committee's got to decide the application on the basis of the plans that the applicant has provided. Very often, it's said all the plans can be amended and then it can be dealt with that way. That's not the appropriate way of proceeding. If the applicant wishes to now submit an application for planning permission that's compliant with that London Plan policy for disabled access, they're perfectly at liberty to do so. But I think here there are very strong grounds for refusal on the basis at the moment the application that you've got before you and those plans does not comply with that relevant policy. And I think I'd be concerned if committee was actually ignoring that policy and granting permission that was actually where we'd recently been upheld on appeal at the case mentioned in the report, where we've insisted on that for the benefit of future occupiers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes. Fiona.
Sorry, Chairman. I was just going to touch on that briefly. As part of the recommendation, I would just like to suggest in refusal reason 3 that we delete the words in diagram 27. So then we're just, as you know, contrary to approved document M.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, officers, and the developer or the residents. I read this report. My main concern is privacy. So the tree plant is no permanent solution. Also, I agree with James and Glenn. So I'm the second. I agree with the officer's recommendation.
So you can actually propose it. You haven't even proposed it. You wish to. Yeah, with a full highway agreement. So you want to propose it?
Yeah, I'm the second to refuse it.
All right. Sorry. It hasn't been proposed yet, so you can propose it.
Yeah, sorry, I propose it. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman, but Councillor Tuckwell raised my point already, so that's all right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going actually to propose it, but yes, I would like to second it with the 4th refusal reason.
Thank you. Okay, so let's just make it clear. So it's been proposed and seconded, and we are the additional proposal of the highways. Yeah.
So it's the highways arrangement where there's it's the alterations to an in-out highways access that will have unacceptable impacts on highway safety. And if you're happy to delegate to me, yes. I'll ensure the correct policies and the appropriate wording is.
And also the amendment that Fiona made of deleting
the words diagram 27 from the refusal reason.
There is one sort of clarification I just wanted to make before members make a final decision, that because of the non-determination appeal we wouldn't be issuing a refusal. These would be the refusal reasons we will share with the planning inspectorate.
Okay. Okay, so that's clear. So we're proposed and second, and on those votes, can I have a show of hands those who agree with officer recommendation for refusal? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, item 872 Hairfield Road, Fiona.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Right, I'd just firstly like to draw members' attention to the addendum report for this one, because there were some late reps received from the agent. We've tried to deal with these within the addendum itself, but I will touch on them as we kind of go through the presentation. Planning permission is sought here for the demolition of the existing property at the site and for the erection of a new building to home 9 flats. So there'll be 3 one-bedroom flats and 6 two-bedroom flats on the site. Permission was refused previously in August 2021 and it was subsequently dismissed at appeal. I've just put a copy of that appeal decision on members' desk just in case you have any questions or want to refer to it. But we're concerned that the same issues still stand. So there's still sort of the key issues in the case. It is a different proposal which we must fully assess, but the same issues arise. The site on the constraints plan you can see is in a parking management scheme, and there is a listed building just to the north. That's never been a key issue, and there's no impact on the setting to consider. So just turning to the site plan again, it's in a verdant plot of the road. It's, you know, as existing, got a very modest scale, well spaced. It's described in the report in some detail. And it's turning to the site plan, you can see how that building will then change. So it will be a very large property set in the plot, we believe quite close to the boundaries, and it gives rise to concerns about not only character and appearance but also the impact on neighbours. So the site plan I've put up on the screen is aiming to show a 45-degree line from neighbours. Now that is a really useful tool for us as planners to assess the impact on amenity, outlook, light. However, in this particular street, as noted by the inspector quite specifically, the baseline is different, so your expectation of amenity would be higher in this particular area. It's also really relevant to note that number 74, so just where I'm indicating on the screen, the property at the top, that's in use as 4 flats, and it has windows in the side of that existing outrigger and windows in the back. So, you know, those windows are extra important. They already sit next to or onto an outrigger. So the building and the proximity is of concern to us. This is just an image to show the crossover arrangement. In the previous application there were no objections from transport, but neighbours are still concerned about that, so I just wanted to include that slide. The existing building I think is quite attractive, but it's not protected, so we're not in a conservation area, it's not listed. But the scale and the quantum of the development that's replacing is a real concern to us, and I'll just turn to the slides to show you that. As you can see on the floor plans, we're also, and translating into the refusal reasons, we're also concerned about the mix. So the existing property is a family home, and we're losing that and not gaining a 3-bed or a 4-bed back. It's all 1 and 2 bedrooms, which we're concerned about. Then turning to this image of the site survey, you'll note from the addendum report that the agent has said the yew tree would be retained. The ARB report actually says it's going to be removed. Either way, I don't think it is a key issue because I don't think the preservation of the yew tree would overcome our concerns about character, appearance and the impact there. And just showing you the bird's eye view, I think you can see that relationship, see the sort of open character and nature. The elevations, which I've skimmed past, so I'll just really quickly go back, apologies for that. So these are the elevation drawings you can see. They're quite small, so I've got another slide coming. It's trying to take cues from these properties next door, which are sort of mid-19th century. They're quite different, and they've still got a good spacing between them, and they're very attractive. They're very vertical in their emphasis, whereas the result we're getting here, because it's kind of going from it in such a wide scale, it doesn't work as well as, well, they got it right in the Victorian times, I would say. So looking at the street scene, so that's the dismissed versus the proposed, and you can see how they've tried to overcome the reasons, how to try and reduce the scale with the roof, but we are concerned that hasn't gone far enough, and the overall width, scale and massing is still a real concern for us. And then again, I've just included the elevations dismissed and proposed. This actually doesn't as clearly show it because they're not lined up with the right elevation, and the depth has been reduced since the appeal, but we don't believe it's gone far enough to overcome the concerns and the key issues that we've identified in the report. So our recommendation remains refusal, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Fiona. That's a very good report. David Emanuel. They have photos. Yeah, they're up. Is that okay? Okay. So whenever you're ready, David.
Thank you and good evening. I speak on behalf of those who signed the petition against this renewed attempt at what was being described by the petitioners as an overdevelopment. 71 people signed that petition, which speaks to the strength of feeling locally about this project. The message that the local residents want me to convey to you, their councillors, is that they do not want this development, that it is totally unsuitable given its location. This is not a case of not in my backyard. This is a case of the demolition of yet another family home, further changing the character of the area, and the overdevelopment of the site to cram in 9 residential units. 9 units, 15 bedrooms, and therefore up to 30-person occupancy, with provision for not one family space. We urge you to agree with the planning officer's recommendation to refuse, but it's not just the overdevelopment of the site detracting from the street scene, or the loss of the verdant character of the area identified by the officer, or the loss of another family home to the local area. There are other reasons as well. The petitioners say it's much more than that. This is the wrong development in the wrong location, and the petitioners wish to reiterate 2 particularly important detrimental factors that would be caused by this development. The first is the impact on the traffic conditions on Hairfield Road, the effect on congestion, and most importantly, the threat to the safety of pedestrians on Hairfield Road. You could not put a multi-occupancy development in a worse place on Hairfield Road with 12 parking spaces. The slide in front of you now shows you where number 72 is, the red marker, and the blue circles show 3 road junctions all around it. That's it, Fairfield, Fairlight directly opposite it, and Cambridge Road. So this is bang in the middle of 3 junctions already, and anyone who knows this stretch of Hairfield Road will know it is narrow, the pavement is narrow, there are parking bays all along the road which create bottlenecks and obstruction. The Fairfield Road junction is difficult to pull out of, and there are constant problems on this road where vehicles are damaged, speed limits are recklessly ignored. If we could turn to the next slide, please. Yet the developer's plans propose a junction right in the middle of all that, for 12 cars to come and go. And what we can see here is on the left of the top picture, that's the edge of number 72. If you look down, it's not the clearest. In the distance on the left are parking bays all the way along. In this photo, there are no cars in them. But when you see in the dark in the bottom, cars have to come into the middle of the road to pass. There are blockages, and you have, as I say, cars coming out from 3 other places in proximity. What it will be like when there are months of lorries and construction vehicles, it doesn't bear thinking about. While it may be temporary like any construction site, it will amount to an unacceptable interference to the right to quiet and to all the road users for months, to anyone who lives around that area. If we go to slide 3, please, you can see from the other side, further up the road, looking down towards where 72 is, just after those black square on the right, you can see the parking bays, you can see how narrow it is, and that's the exit from Fairfield Road. Putting another junction in the middle of all that is unacceptable. And the next slide, please. This is looking from Cambridge Road down towards 72. 72 is just past the second car on the left. You can see how they have to pull into the middle of the road to get around the parked cars. This whole stretch is dangerous enough already without the fact that those parking spaces are bound to be used by visitors or second car owners, and it's suggested further space for cars will cause more chaos on a dangerous piece of road. The highways impact of the local plan for Hillingdon specifically states that developmental proposals must ensure safe and efficient vehicle access. I see the time, I'm going to speed through. The petitioners suggest this is not the right place. for a new junction. Can I have the fifth one, please? The next detrimental impact is the car park. A car park for 10 spaces at the back, somewhere in that circle at the bottom of the garden as it is now, will be a car park for 10 spaces. The garden space that will be in existence in this proposed development will be right next to that car park with a driveway going through the middle of it. That car park will be right next to 2 Cambridge Roads garden. It will go all the way down the side of it. How that doesn't affect a deterioration in air quality to residents, the petitioners don't understand. Add to that balconies at the back, 4 of them to make up for the lack of garden space, the threat to noise to the other gardens, the height of the building taking light. It's suggested strongly by those who I speak for on behalf of the petitioners. This is the wrong place for the wrong development.
Thank you. I think we'll end it at that sentence there. I think it's a good place to end. Does anybody have any questions? No? Thank you very much. David, if you'd like to turn the microphone off for me, please. Thank you. I don't see the applicant or the agent here. David Webb or Mr. Barrett. Nope. Okay. So, Councillor Bowles, if you'd like to come to the table. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to be brief. So once again, seems to be the Hairfield Road show tonight, but I wish to support the recommendation and local residents in refusing this application as well. It's a classic example of try again and try and wear people down. But as you can hear, the residents are not having it. It's still not appropriate, and I support the refusal for the reasons set out in the officer report, mainly for the detrimental effect that it would have on neighbouring properties, including number 2 Cambridge Road, as we heard from the petitioner. Once again, I'm disappointed that Highways couldn't come up with the reasons to refuse. Anyone who knows this part of the Hairfield Road knows what the traffic is like. It's been really pointed out well by the petitioner there. It's going to be legalising a death trap, I believe, if you go ahead with allowing all these 9 properties to be built. Anyway, thanks again, and please refuse.
Thank you, Councillor. Has anybody got any questions? Yes, we've got no. Yes, Councillor Wilson, we might have a little surprise for you in a minute, actually. Just want to wait and see. Okay, first of all, officers would like to come in, and then I'll open it to the floor.
Yeah, just really quickly touch on the issues around transport and highway safety. A key material consideration for you this evening is the previous decision and the previous appeal, and there was no reason for refusal on highway grounds on the last application, and it wasn't dismissed on that point by the inspector. So we've attached substantial weight to that decision when coming to our decision, and we don't believe there is a reason for refusal on highway safety grounds. However, we still have 3 very strong reasons for refusal, in my opinion. Thank you, Chairman.
We tried for you, but unfortunately we're not there. So, Councillor Charville, you've indicated. Councillor Sapori, you're second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to reiterate what the councillor said, that road safety and highways comments, but obviously it got answered. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor.
As the previous application has been refused, and even inspector had dismissed this application, and there is most of the points are still there, the issues are still there. So I propose officer recommendation.
Thank you very much. Who's second? Councillor Tuckwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's disappointing that we can't include a highways refusal reason, but reading the appeal, we know why, and thanks for officers for sharing that. We've been in that place before, and we'll be in that place again, I'm sure. For me, again, the loss of a family dwelling is just too much. There's no 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom dwellings here, so that's one really strong refusal reason. The overlooking the relationship with number 74, I think it is, and the sheer size of it, there are 3 very strong refusal reasons that I'm very happy to second this evening.
Thank you very much. So I'm proposing second. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour of the officer's recommendation? That's unanimous. It's refused. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go on to the agenda, non-petition items. Number 9.
Katie, is this... Oh, sorry, Nisha, I beg your pardon.
It's okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Item 9, the Lounge Bar and Restaurant, Dawley Road, Hayes. The application seeks planning permission for the change of use of the former public house, sui generis, into a place of worship/community centre, use class F1/F2, for the Masjid Muslim community in Hayes, including ancillary residential accommodation on the first floor. The proposal would also involve the demolition of the outbuilding and side lean-to additions to create associated parking and landscaping. This is a part retrospective planning application, as the site is currently being used without planning consent as a place of worship and community centre. The Council's Enforcement Department is investigating this breach under reference ENF/802/20. Members should note that this current application is a resubmission following the refusal of application reference 2019-23-22. I will provide further details about this previous application during the presentation. Here is a site location plan. The site is located on the northeastern side of Dawley Road. It comprises a former 19th century public house previously known as the Hambro Arm. Dawley Road is a classified borough main distributor road, A437. Bird's eye view for context. So the pointer shows the former public house building, and at the back is an outbuilding previously known as the Buddha Lounge. As you can see from the constraints plan, to the south of the site is the locally listed HMV EMI building, highlighted in brown, and the Botwell Thorn EMI conservation area, which is highlighted by the orange lines. The site is designated with an airport safeguarding zone, air quality management area, potentially contaminated land zone, and haze focus area. The site has a public transport accessibility level rating of 1B, very poor/2 poor, where 0 is the worst level and 6B is the highest level. Here is a street view of the application site. So as previously mentioned, you have the former public house building here, and then you have that outbuilding at the back of the site. So here are the existing elevations of the former public house building. This proposal, as mentioned earlier, seeks to demolish the existing side additions. So this one to my left, which is what I'm pointing at, is going to be demolished. And this small section here, where you can see the two windows, would be demolished as well. And the outbuilding at the back would also be demolished. And that's in order to provide additional on-site car parking spaces. So these are the proposed elevations. You have the existing floor plans. So just to make it a bit clearer, where you can see me pointing, so that's the side addition that would be demolished. And then you've got that small side addition here that would also be demolished. And then you've got this small section here, which would be demolished. So these are the proposed floor plans. The ground floor would contain a separate prayer room for men and women, a kitchen with storage and servicing areas, 3 classrooms, a library, trustee room, legal advice room and toilets. The first floor level would contain an ancillary flat to be used by the imam. The proposal would provide 25 on-site car parking spaces, one of which would be for a minibus, so I'll just point to it here. And one would be reserved for the imam. This leaves 23 unreserved spaces for visitors, of which 2 would be for disabled spaces, and they're located here. 4 Sheffield-type cycle stands would also be provided, so they're there where I'm pointing, and those stands would provide capacity to hold up to 8 bicycles. The submitted design and access statement indicates that the maximum number of attendees to the site would be 75. In terms of consultation, 9 neighbouring properties were consulted on the 15th of October 2021. No representations for neighbouring properties had been received by the end of the consultation period. However, objections were received from Hayes Conservation Area Advisory Panel and a ward councillor. These objections primarily concern the following: inadequate number of on-site car parking spaces, failure to demonstrate how attendance numbers to the place of worship/community centre would be controlled, parking of vehicles to the front of neighbouring properties, adverse impact to the quality of life for residents, harm to the free flow of traffic on Dawley Road, which is a busy through route to both Heathrow Airport and the M4. The nature of the proposal being proposed, i.e. the change of use of the former public house to a place of worship/community centre, is similar to the plan application refused under reference 2019-23-22. The previous application was refused on the 9th of July 2021 on the following ground. The application fails to demonstrate how attendance numbers to the place of worship/community centre would be controlled and does not make provision for a minibus set-down/pick-up area. Without such control measures and provision for a minibus to safely service the site, the proposal would likely give rise to excessive car use, which would have a detrimental impact upon road safety, parking stress and the free flow of traffic, contrary to policies T4 and T6 of the London Plan and policies DMT1, DMT2 and DMT6 of the Hillingdon Local Plan Part 2. Notwithstanding the ground for refusal, the loss of the public house use of the site was considered acceptable under the previous application. Officers have adopted the same position in respect to this current planning application. However, this is subject to the compliance of all other planning policy considerations, including the impact on neighbouring residential amenity, parking and highway safety. Officers have been mindful of potential residential amenity impacts to neighbouring properties in terms of noise and disturbance. The submitted environmental impact assessment was reviewed by the Council's noise officer, who has raised no objection to the proposal from a neighbouring residential amenity perspective, subject to conditions. These conditions would have controlled the hours of use, the transmission of noise from the building, restricting noise limits of any plant/machinery, and restricting noise from within the car park. The proposal would not cause harm to the character and appearance of the area and would have a neutral impact on the setting of the adjacent conservation area and the locally listed building, which, if you look at the photo, it's that building there that's in the background. Since the refusal of the previous planning application, the applicant has submitted additional details in respect to parking and highway safety, including the provision of a minibus car park space, which you can see here. These details were considered by officers, including the Council's Highways Department. Officers are of the view that this current application, which has been presented to members this evening, has failed to fully address the grounds for refusal attached to application 2019/2322. The current proposal, noting the lack of on-site car parking provision, would significantly increase the highway safety risk to all road users in the local area through illegal and inconsiderate street parking and manoeuvring. This is evidenced by the photographs, which will be shortly shown and discussed by the Council's Highways Officer. The on-street parking spaces on the nearby streets are limited and are also restricted by yellow lines and parking management schemes. There is therefore substantial pressure on the existing street car parking spaces that are available. The highway conditions are further affected by Dawley Road being a classified borough main distributor road. The submitted travel plan is intended to reduce the number of cars generated by encouraging alternative modes of transport instead of private cars, including the option of dropping off and collecting attendees. However, officers are of the opinion that this by itself cannot be relied upon to mitigate the harmful impact on highway safety arising from the lack of on-site car parking spaces and increased trip generation. Furthermore, no clear or robust details have been provided to demonstrate how restricting the number of attendees to the site to 75 would be managed or enforced. During the most recent officer's site visit, which was conducted during Friday's prayer on the 8th of July 2022, it was observed that attendees were unlawfully parking on Network Rail's access point, which is located opposite the application site. Network Rail has raised concerns as this access point is not only the entrance to the site offices for Crossrail works, but is also the access route to a road rail access point where access may be required in the event of an emergency. Members, please refer to the addendum for the comments received from Network Rail. The Council's Highway Officer will discuss this matter in further detail and show photographs of the illegal parking at the Network Rail site. The benefits that the place of worship and community centre would bring to the local Muslim community has been noted. However, this would not outweigh the detrimental impact on highway safety and transport network safety, street parking stress and the free flow of traffic. Officers therefore recommend that members refuse this application. It should be noted that the ground for refusal has been updated since the publication of the committee report, and that's to take into account the issue about cars parking to the front of the Network Rail site. The revised wording for the ground for refusal is included in the addendum and reads as follows. The proposal provides insufficient on-site car parking and levels of trip generation would lead to additional traffic and parking in and around the roads in the local area to the detriment of the free flow of traffic and conditions of highway safety. Also, no clear and robust details have been provided to demonstrate how restricting the maximum number of attendees to the site to 75 would be managed or enforced. Furthermore, there are concerns that indiscriminate parking may block access to a nearby Network Rail Road access point, adversely affecting London's transport network and increasing the risk of danger to transport network users. The proposal would therefore have a harmful impact on highway and transport network safety, street parking stress and the free flow of traffic, contrary to policies T1, T4 and T6 of the London Plan, policies DMT1, DMT2, DMT6 of the Hillingdon Local Plan Part 2 and the MPPF. I will now defer to Alan Tilley, who will be discussing the proposal's parking and highway safety issues in further detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. It was very thorough. Alan?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Nisha. The application site is situated on the A437, which forms part of the Council's classified network. The application site also has a very poor PTAL rating, 2 to bordering 1B, indicating that access to public transport is poor and there would be a reliance on the private car for trip making to the development. The site is outside the town centre and has poor access to public car parks. In the vicinity of the development, there are single yellow line parking restrictions, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The plans you can see there show that the development would provide 24 spaces plus space for one minibus. The minibus space is cited as within the travel plan as being one of the means to get people to the proposal site. So the minibus parking space is key. Next slide. For those, thank you. This slide shows Dawley Road looking south towards the bridge over the Great Western Main Line. Now, the bridge allows vehicles to travel downwards towards the proposal site at quite a high speed. They gather speed, and similarly, that same bridge restricts visibility for a car leaving the development site as they look southbound. Cars are coming over the brow of the hill. Speed surveys are being undertaken, and that shows that the 85th percentile speed is 32 miles per hour. So that shows that 15% of all cars passing are travelling in excess of 32 miles per hour. In response to the road safety concerns in the vicinity of the bridge, how it bends round and then descends, there's an advisory 25 mile an hour speed limit, a sharp bend sign, and even a vehicle activated sign. Probably skip that one. The Dawley Road is heavily trafficked with a high proportion of heavy goods vehicles, which allows the passage of 16-metre articulated lorries. There's a very significant 12,000 vehicles per day in either direction. It is a busy road. Thank you. Yeah. If you go next one. Next one. That's great. Now, as you will have heard from Nisha's presentation, the site is already in operation as a mosque, which gives us a snapshot of how the proposal would operate should planning permission be granted. Now, this shows these are photographs of the car park taken last Friday. The development site provides 24 car parking spaces, 27 car parking spaces were observed parked. No minibus was observed parked. This photograph was taken at the time of Friday prayers. Now, you can imagine a situation where a worshipper arrives, finds the car parked fully full. They would then have to reverse, turn away, and then search in the surrounding roads for somewhere else to park. They may be in a hurry and not properly concentrating on the traffic around them. 27 cars driving into the car park, turning in from the right. They'd be holding up traffic behind them as they're waiting for a gap to enter the car park, having an effect on the free flow of traffic. And you've also got to ask the question, how would fire and ambulance services access the premises in the case of emergency? Thank you. Now, the bottom two pictures here are significant. Well, the first shows the heavy goods vehicles that use the road. The bottom two pictures show cars parking in the road rail emergency access point. That's needed for planned maintenance and inspections, plus 24-hour access for emergencies. And on Friday, during prayers, 5 cars were observed parked there. If you look at the bottom left slide, you'll see an orange car. I think it's a Kia, I'm not sure, but bear that car in mind, please. So those are the cars parked in the road rail access point. The next slide, this is another view of the road rail access point, and this photo was taken as we were leaving the site visit, and there were no cars there. So this clearly suggests that the cars we witnessed parked were worshippers at the mosque. Furthermore, next slide. Furthermore, we observed cars parked on nearby residential streets. This is on the opposite side of Dorley Road in a state of flats. And the next slide will show that same car park after Friday prayers, and you can now see that it's almost empty. So I'm demonstrating here that the development has insufficient car parking on plot, and it's leading to cars being displaced both in residential areas and most significantly within the rail access point. Thank you. Now, this slide shows the amount of activity taking place around the site. Notice the orange car again that was originally parked in the rail access point. The car is now making a manoeuvre where he's deciding to move to park in front of the proposal site. Prior to that top slide on the right, he was parking, or she was parking, on single yellow lines where there's a parking restriction. And there you can see its final parking place in front of the proposal site. The point I'm making here is the development is generating a great deal of activity. The on-site car parking is not catering for demand. As I've already mentioned, 27 cars were parked within the site. There's room to cater for 24. Next slide, please. And a greater concern is lack of provision of vehicle drop-off and pick-up. I don't think you can see it in these photographs, but where you can see that red box van, a car was parked and 2 gentlemen got out. They then crossed the road where there were no formal crossing facilities, and while the car was pulling up, of course, it was hindering the flow of traffic behind it. The footway of that location is also less than 1 metre wide. And as I've mentioned, there's a high proportion of HGVs, so they're less able to see pedestrians crossing the road, especially small children. So to summarise, the development creates a road safety risk, people crossing the road amongst traffic. It hinders the free flow of traffic while cars are dropping people off, and it leads to parking displacement, which includes parking within the rail access points needed by emergency services and nearby residential streets. We feel that the problems we've witnessed on Friday are likely to get worse as the number of worshippers grows in the future. There are highway objections to this proposal. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, officers, for a fantastic presentation. Can I go straight to the floor? Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is especially concerning on highway grounds. Under point 3.2, it says this premises would accommodate up to 75 worshippers at every time. Given everything that Alan's just said regarding the highways, and assuming in most vehicles you have around 2 people per vehicle, that would still be 38 vehicles coming in and out of this property at any given time. So, which is far more than the sort of 23 or 24 spots that they mentioned that they had on their property. As you can see, as someone who drives up and down this road regularly, I often encounter traffic coming along because there are people parking outside the homes. Actually, you can see it on the top right image behind the lorry. You can see people with their homes and their driveways. People often block the pavement, block the pathway there as well. Not to mention the people coming in and out of the actual property. And if there are special occasions where there are perhaps a religious function, there are also lorries and vans that park along that road as well, which not only blocks the pavement, blocks pedestrian viewway and coming in and forth, but it also creates traffic and it also restricts the view coming up to the bridge. This wasn't mentioned in the site plans, but sort of on the opposite end, the bottom end of the road, there's a bend which leads to a large 5 exit roundabout, which people use at all times of day. It's always busy, and people often speed down there and speed up the ramp as well. I think Alan mentioned this. There's a blockage, a restricted view coming down, and as he said, people drive quite fast down there. He said often in excess of 32 miles an hour, which makes it extremely dangerous, not only for people parking on either side with no specified crossing, but also for the drivers who are coming down, especially HGVs who might not have that view, especially if people are bringing their families and young children. It's a risk. I'd like to also mention the point in the addendum where Network Rail has proposed their site also being blocked, and that is a continued problem for them as they need constant accessway, and also a free flow of traffic. There's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong here. I don't think the plans submitted sufficiently cover the risks that there are for having these in place. I think that we all know how we feel about retrospective applications in the first place, but especially one that has been submitted when something honestly quite irresponsible has happened in creating this, not only for people's safety but also for driver safety as well on such a busy main road. I would like to go straight in and propose the officer's recommendations for refusal.
Councillor Tuckwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, what's been said, we've had an extensive presentation this evening. It's covered off some really good grounds. Councillor Gohill has said her piece as well, and I'd like to second.
Okay, so proposed and seconded. Can we go for votes here? Can we show of hands? We agree with the officer's recommendation for refusal. That's unanimous. Thank you, Anisha. Right. Katie, I believe it's your next. Item 10.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this application is to change the use of the ground floor from a solicitor's office to a hot food takeaway with the installation of an extract duct as well. So I think just to be mindful, the planning permission has previously been granted for this proposal in June 2019, but it has since expired, so that's hence the resubmission to renew the planning permission. So the site is located in a shopping parade in Ickenham Local Centre and Ickenham Village Conservation Area. So we'll just show you, that's the constraints plan showing the conservation area. Okay, so if we have a look on the aerial here, you can see the site outlined in red, but also I'll just show you where they access the rear for servicing as well. So there's this road that comes down the back here, and
it goes through there, and I'll show you some photographs of the rear as well. Okay, so that's just a wider view of the shops. So it's this unit here, and I'll just go on a bit closer. So it's kind of the equivalent of 2 units on the ground floor. So it's the one there named Maplestone. So that is it's currently a solicitor's office on the ground, 1st and 2nd floor. So they're going to retain the use of the solicitors on the 1st and 2nd floors and change the use of the ground floor. And that's just the other side there. Okay, so the only external alteration that's being proposed is to install an extract flue. So that will be on the top of the roof. And I'll show you, it's the picture, that's the image of the rear service lane. So it's the property in the corner there. Okay, so these are the ground floor plans. They don't really show much. There's no real internal structural changes. They're just putting in a kitchen countertop there, you can see. They are showing at the rear of the property, that's outside there, is the refuse storage, refuse and recycling. So if we just flick through these floor plans, so to show you the external change, so here you can see on the, I'll show you, point out where it is. That's the existing roof plan, and you can see, sorry for people who need to turn around, but it's just this bit here is where the extract flow is coming here. So it's existing and proposed. You can see it at the top. So the visibility from the street view is going to be minimal. Wouldn't be the character of the conservation area would be preserved. There's no other changes in terms of advertisement consent that they'll need to change the signage. That's a separate permission. So there is, I think it's informative 9 has been included in the recommendation, just reminding the applicants that they will need to apply for a separate advertisement consent to change the signage. Okay, so right, in terms of objections, so there's been 4 neighbouring objections. The matters that were raised were a number of hot food outlets, proximity to schools encouraging unhealthy eating, and litter from customers. So these matters have been addressed in the Principle of Development, which is section 7.01 of the report. But essentially, in terms of the number of food outlets, the case officer has done a survey of the local centre, and so overall there were approximately 10% of the total shopping centre offering would be hot food takeaways. So we're happy that it wouldn't result in over proliferation of hot food takeaways. In terms of proximity to schools, there is London Plan Policy E9 that seeks to that addresses that matter in terms of hot food takeaways should be a certain distance from schools. In this case, it's 400 metres, so there's also included in section 7.01 of the report. This has been assessed and all the local schools are in excess, though it's greater than 400 metres from the schools. And in terms of litter from customers, so the refuse storage area that I showed you, that's for the operations of the business. In terms of customers, I guess getting their hot food takeaway and littering in the surrounding area, there is informative 10 included on the recommendation. So this is just to remind the applicants of their obligations under the Environment Protection Act and the Clean Neighbourhoods and Environments Acts to reduce and prevent litter. So officers have assessed the application and consider the principle of development acceptable. The character of the conservation area would be maintained. There would be no harm to neighbouring amenity or impacts to the highway. Therefore, we've recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions detailed in section 2 of the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Tuckle.
Thank you. Yeah, good report. Good report. I don't see any major difficulties with this, well, no difficulties really. Just a question is, how confident are we that we don't need some form of informative or condition that talks about the extract and flue arrangements? I note from the report that there's an internal system in place, but then that's within a solicitor's office, and we're going to change it to a hot takeaway. So, is there anything that we need to be mindful of, conscious that there are a couple of other restaurants or takeaways further down the parade? And I think I noticed from the image at the rear there were a couple of flues at the rear of the properties there, and I'm just wondering if officers are confident that we don't need to have anything which just safeguards. There's one there, look. I don't think one officers are confident that we don't need to have anything by way of a condition or something which just safeguards residents from noise and odours.
Okay. In terms of the application has been assessed by our technical officer who looks at noise and odour emissions. I think there weren't any concerns raised, principally because you can see with these ones on the rear. You can see one there. So the rear elevation here, and you'll have residences on some of these first floor ones. In terms of this application site, the upper floors are the solicitors, so it's still part of the applicant's demise this week. But the location of the extract flue also will be on the very top. If I can just find that plan. Yeah, so it's just poking out the top. So it's going to be away from any windows on the first floor rear elevation. This one's a little bit unusual in that the ducting goes internally, and so the extract flue is just on the top. So we did get that, because of the unusual sort of the way it's proposed internally, we did get that checked over as well, and the technical officer is satisfied that it wouldn't have an impact that can't be addressed through other legislation.
Thank you. Is that right?
I'm happy with that and happy to propose officer's recommendation.
Great, and also just wanted to I just wanted to make clear that if the solicitors wanted to change the usage, they'd have to come back to the committee for that. So I've got Councillor Gohill and then Councillor Sansbury.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pretty pleased with the application and the officer's recommendations with this as well. I was slightly concerned about the prevention of litter, but it seems that under this street litter control notice, it would be adequately cared to, and if officers are satisfied with that, I would be happy to second the officer's recommendation.
Because the application was already granted in 2019, we are just extending the validity of that application. So I think we should not have any objections.
Well done. Thank you. So I'm proposing secretary. Can I show of hands? Those in favour with officer's recommendation? It's unanimous and you show. Okay. Last item of the evening, item 11, 3 to 5 station approach. Katie.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is also for a proposed change of use. So it's to change the use of the site from a car workshop / tyre centre to an MOT centre. So it's not in any particular designated areas. There we go. So this is a street scene of the shopping parade that it's located in. So as you can see, it's this premises here that I'm outlining and showing. This is existing as a car workshop and tyre centre. Okay, that's just a close-up of the premises. So there's no external alterations proposed on this application. And also what they're doing is internally they're going to install an MOT bay within the existing building so they can do their testing. So this is just the rear of the site. There'll be no changes here, but you can the MOT bay is going to be in here. So if I just go through to the floor plans. Okay. So this is the existing, this is where it's going in here, and that's it there. Okay, so no objections have been received either externally or from internal consultees, which has included the Council's Highways Officer, Access Officer and Noise and Odour Specialist. Officers have assessed the application and consider the principle of the development acceptable. As there are no external changes proposed to the building, there will be no impact on the visual amenity of the area, and given that the MOT testing will be a marginal change to the existing use as a car workshop, there would not be any harm to residential amenity or highways impacts. Therefore, planning officers recommend that the application be approved, subject to the conditions detailed in section 2 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Precise to the point. Councillor Tuckwell, you've indicated first.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy with this. I think it gives the fine residents of South Ruislip, another option to have their cars MOT'd in addition to what's already been offered, so I'm happy to go with officer's recommendation.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers. I think this is very straightforward. There's nothing changed outside, but internally they're changing, so I'm the second.
Thank you very much. So, proposed and seconded, if I'll show of hands, please, those in favour of officer recommendation. Thank you very much. That's the end of the evening. Nice hot evening. All sweaty. So I'd like to thank you all for watching and for all the officers and councillors here doing a fantastic job. Thank you and good night.